I have with me this morning four of my colleagues. To my extreme right, Minister Rambarat, Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Minister Rohan Sinanan, Minister of Works and Transport, Minister Sherry Cockburn-Critchlow, Minister of Social Development, Family Services, and Minister Garcia, Minister of Education. It's really to give the population, as we've been doing over the past few days, an update on where we are coming out of the recent natural flooding disasters and to give you all the most up-to-date information as to what is taking place. So I will start and then pass over to my colleagues for their specific areas. I started off early this morning by doing a reconnaissance and an assessment of what is taking place on the ground over the various areas that have been affected by the flooding over the past few days. And I'm happy to report that generally the majority of water, flood water, has run off, and there are only a couple areas that are still underwater. So there is the Manzanilla Road for about 3 to 5 kilometers of stretch is still underwater. The water has subsided somewhat, but still low cars and sedans may have some difficulty, so we ask that you avoid it. 3 to 5 kilometers on the Manzanilla Road stretch. South El Socorro still had some water, but it is running off. Managed to see it is running off, but there is still some water flooding in South El Socorro. The following areas are now clear of flood waters: Cedar Grove, Mafikin, St. Helena, Kelly Village, Madras Road, Greenvale, Oropoon, El Socorro North, and Las Lomas, and other areas thankfully are now free of the flood waters. As you all would be aware, the north-south highway, all four lanes, northbound and southbound, are all now clear on the Raya Butler Highway. There have been a number of landslides throughout, in particular North Trinidad, Lady Young yesterday, that were cleared. I'll leave Minister Sinanan to deal with that. There is one right now that is up on the north coast around the Las Cuevas area. We are aware of it. Ministry of Works crews are already up there doing the necessary clearing work. Unfortunately, despite all of our cries and our pleas for persons to understand that at the current times we don't want to have to divert resources, we don't want persons who are already under a lot of distress and trauma to be put under further distress and trauma, there continues to be the circulation of distorted reality, distorted news, and there's just two areas on that I'd like to just clear up today. The Ministry of Health has confirmed, they've actually put out a press release, the Ministry of Health has confirmed that at this stage there are still no confirmed fatalities as a result of the flooding. Law enforcement have confirmed the exact same information to me. So the continued peddling of stories that persons have met their demise and there have been fatalities during and as a result of the flooding, at this stage, both our health authorities as well as our law enforcement authorities continue to say that that is not so. There is nothing further that we as the government can do at this stage. We have asked that persons be responsible, stop peddling that. I don't know what they think their purpose is, what it is that they hope to achieve. As I've said repeatedly, I don't know who would wish death in a situation such as this. All I can say is that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago would take note of where this continued distortion of reality comes from, mark them very carefully, and understand that they are the ones who are destructive to Trinidad and Tobago. Furthermore, and it actually came up yesterday in the press conference with a question as to leptospirosis. At this stage, again, there are no confirmed reports of leptospirosis. There are certainly no deaths that have occurred as a result of that. There are a number of videos that are circulating on social media. I am informed that those are aged videos that may have been incidents that took place last year or even before. At this stage, we have no confirmed reports. That I would be surprised if it doesn't change, that persons don't contract leptospirosis because of the level of the floodwaters that we have been dealing with and how widespread it has been, but I'm hoping it stays that way. Certainly any suggestions there have been any fatalities as a result of it or there are persons currently warded, at this stage, again, the Ministry of Health has put out a media release saying that that is simply not true. I'll use this opportunity to just tell persons that leptospirosis can cause a wide range of symptoms, and I say this so persons can look out for it and be aware. High fever, headache, chills, muscle aches, vomiting, jaundice, which is yellow skin and eyes, red eyes, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and rashes. Many of these symptoms can be mistaken for other diseases. In addition, some infected persons may have no symptoms at all. The time between a person's exposure to a contaminated source and becoming sick is 2 days to 2 weeks to 4 weeks. Illness usually begins abruptly with fever and other symptoms. The Ministry of Health advises, if you believe that you may have leptospirosis, please visit your nearest health center or your doctor immediately. As you all are aware, we have been providing health services at some of the shelters. The health centers are open. The public medical services have been available and have been spread out throughout this whole incident and in the various places affected by flooding. I am happy to say there have also been a number of doctors, nurses, other medical health personnel who have been volunteering their services of their own volition, and that again is to be commended. The garbage collection and cleanup continues. This is something that we had foreseen, obviously. This morning I was in contact with the Minister of Local Government. Also, the Minister of Public Utilities is aware. The regional corporations, we're asking them to be aware, our army services, etc. In a lot of these areas, you're seeing the gathering of rubbish and the heaps of rubbish that are piling up outside of persons' homes, as is to be expected, as they dispose of all of the items that were destroyed and damaged during the flood. We are doing everything that we can to ensure that these items are collected and disposed of properly. I saw, for example, in the Kelly Village area, St. Helena area, they were using the recreation field and recreation grounds as a dumping point. So we've asked the authorities to go there and to clear it, because as you all know, these rubbish piles, rubbish heaps can then lead to public health issues. We are going to ask that spraying in the insect vector divisions do the necessary spraying, as we expect mosquitoes and other pest-borne type of issues to arise as a result after this flooding incident. But we are doing all that we can on the garbage collection and the cleanup. I'd like to thank CPEP workers who have come out in their numbers, fire services, the various regional corporations, the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force, URP, and also volunteers who have gone into the various areas and are doing the cleanup. As you would expect, the cleanup is going to take some time. I was happy at the Greenvale, and I've heard criticism on the radio this morning that we only focus on Greenvale. That is quite simply not true. It's one of the areas that's confined. It was badly hit because of the way it is structured and the confined area. I was happy to see that quite a lot of the mud had been taken away over the last 24 to 48 hours. The cleanup exercise continues in all of these areas. As we had said yesterday, in St. Helena, Kelly Village, Las Lomas, and some of the other areas, there were still floodwaters. Those have now receded, so we expect the cleanup drives to continue. As is, I'll leave the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to talk about the disposal, what has been happening with the disposal of dead animals. We still have shelters open in certain areas. I'm sure during the course of today, the ODPM and other responders and agencies responsible will put out the information with respect to these shelters. Some of the shelters, I assume, they're going to start winding down, but we'll make sure there's a proper assessment of persons' needs and how we can assist people in getting back up on their feet. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force patrols have continued. They've continued throughout the night in a lot of these areas. Unfortunately, there were some incidents of persons threatening, or maybe it's a high emotion time and persons have been traumatized, being a little less than law-abiding. So the Defence Force and the police services have been patrolling in these areas, Greenvale, St. Helena, Kelly Village, other areas, and they have been doing a good job. Electricity is 90% restored in the Greenvale area, and what I can say during the course of today, the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force is going to continue providing security escorts for the relief that is being sent to some of these shelters and these relief areas to ensure that there's a general law and order. I thank the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service for assisting continuously with the traffic situations as we have various landslides on the highway, traffic in and about these flooded areas, and just basically being there and assisting with the keeping of law and order. At this stage, I'd like to pass over to the Minister of Social Development and Family Services for her to give us an update.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Of our 14 regions, only 6 were really severely affected. And those include Shogunas, Rio Claro, Sangre Grande, Tunapuna Piaco, Samuel Laventil, and the Couva Tabaquite. As at this morning, we would have completed 110 assessments in Shogunas, 137 in Rio Claro, 190 in Sangre Grande, and 1,065 in Tunapuna Piaco. In terms of Couva Tabaquite, they are 99% complete. Those forms, however, have not reached the ministry thus far, so we have not been able to start the process of having checks done. In terms of Samuel Laventil, as Minister Stewart would have indicated, there are some areas that are still under flood water, so we have not gotten the clearance to go in, so assessments have not been done in there as yet. But as soon as we get the clearance, we have persons on standby and we will commence assessments in there. So thus far, we have done 1,502 assessments. At present, as at 10 o'clock this morning, we would have printed 194 grant checks. We expect to complete an additional 253 by this afternoon. And as at Friday, the 1,502 applications that have been processed, checks will be ready for distribution for those persons. So this is where we are at. We are working very closely with the regional corporation. So as we have done assessments in Greenville, for example, they are going to be there this morning to start collection of the garbage and disposal of same. And we also have over 100 and something persons in the field. This is comprised of ministry staff, staff from other ministries, the ODPM, the Defense Force, and volunteers, citizens who have volunteered. We have taken them through an orientation training process, and they are also out in the field assisting. So as far as the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services is concerned, things are under control. We also have counselors who are providing psychosocial support at shelters and in certain communities providing that service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll ask the Minister of Education next.
Good morning to all. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with the general public some much needed information. First of all, let me deal with schools that were formerly closed but have been reopened today, Wednesday, the 24th of October. And these schools are the Durham Village Hindu Primary School, the Todds Road RC Primary School, the Caroni Hindu Primary School, the La Hoqueta North Government Primary School, the Blanchishes Government Primary School, the Caroni Hindu ECC Center, the Biokar Hindu ECC Center, the Aranguez Government ECC Center, the Sawa Aranguez ECC Center, and the St. Augustine South Government ECCE Center. These 10 schools have reopened today. Schools that are still closed as a result of the weather and the floodwaters still residing on the compound of some of these schools. The Asja Ladies ECCE Center, the Caroni Presbyterian Primary School, the Kunapo St. Francis RC Primary School, the North Oropouche Government Primary School, the North Oropouche RC Primary School, the San Rafael RC Primary School, the St. Helena Presbyterian Primary School, the St. Helena Hindu Primary School, the Valencia South Government Primary School, the Vega de Oropouche ECCE Center, the Vishnu Boys Hindu College, the Warrenville Presbyterian Primary School, the Warrenville TIA ECCE Center, the Warrenville TIA Primary School, and the St. Augustine South Government Primary School. And let me list schools that are still being used as shelters. The Bamboo Grove Presbyterian Primary School, the La Joqueta South Government Primary School, the Las Lomas Government Primary School, the Madras Government Primary School, the St. David's RC Primary School. So these are the schools that I've mentioned. On the one hand, the schools that will resume operations today, schools that are still closed, and schools that are being used at present as shelters. Let me take the opportunity to state that at the level of the Ministry of Education, we are all working to ensure that all of those schools will be ready for occupation by Monday, next week Monday. Our school supervisors are on the field. They are in contact with the principals of the schools, and they are working together to provide the necessary support and assistance so that those schools could be reopened. We also have our social workers who have visited these schools, and they continue to visit these schools, providing the necessary support to both students and the teachers, all in an effort at ensuring that everything goes well for the return of the students and teachers to schools, so that there will be not much trauma where that has been experienced by a number of our school personnel. I'm happy to state that in the education system, we are all working hand in hand with other government agencies. We have been in constant contact with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Community Development, and all relevant ministries, so that we are putting our hands and heads together so that our children will have an opportunity of continuing their education. Another important point is a number of organizations have offered assistance to us in terms of textbooks. As you know, a number of our students have lost all of their textbooks. I have been approached by a number of booksellers asking me to provide them with a list of the names of students who lost their textbooks, and that they are willing to make up for that loss. I can't do that on my own, and therefore I am in contact with our Minister of Social Development and Family Services, and we are working out a system so that those children will be able to receive the textbooks, but it will be done in a way that will not cause too many problems, because, as you know, the Minister has stated before that her ministry is also in a position to offer some financial assistance to these persons. So together, as a government, we are doing all that is possible to bring the education system back to normalcy. In addition to this, let me state that as of today, we have our students and our teachers in schools, in the majority of our schools, the schools that are not affected. And when I look at the figures that I have here, in terms of the primary school, teachers' attendance was 79.86%. Roughly 80% of our teachers have been attending schools. In terms of our students in the primary sector, it is 66.86, approximately 67% of our students attending school. In terms of the secondary sector, we have 72.86 of our teachers attending school, approximately 73% of our teachers attending school, and 54% of our students attending school. Again, as I said before, it tells us that our teachers are stepping up to the plate. The normal dedication that teachers have been showing is coming out, and they are doing everything from all the reports that we have been receiving. They are doing everything to ensure that our students are not left behind. In many cases where our students were not able to attend school because of the delays in transport or whatever reason, I have information that the teachers in our schools are doing everything possible to make up for that lost time. And therefore, I want to thank our teachers, I want to thank our supervisors, I want to thank all our school administrators, because in this period of crisis, we are seeing everybody coming together, working to the benefit of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the Minister of Social Development and Family Services just to give us once again the information with respect to the types of grants that are available. Because unfortunately there seems to be some misinformation with that and a focus that it is only $15,000 and a cap of $15,000, etc. So at the risk of being accused of repeating ourselves, we have to, and I'll ask the Minister of Social Development and Family Services just to remind us what grants are available in the current circumstances.
In terms of persons who would have suffered damage or loss of their appliances and furniture, it's a maximum of $10,000. That same homeowner who may have suffered electrical damage, a grant of up to $25,000 is provided. In terms of structural damage, house repairs, you have a further $15,000 to $20,000. And if your sanitary plumbing was affected, it's $15,000. So that one homeowner can access all of those grants. In addition, where there was a loss of clothing, it's $1,000 per person in the household. Where children would have suffered loss of their school supplies, it's $1,000 for secondary level and $700 for primary level persons within the household. So those are the major grants that are provided within and under disaster relief. We will also recognize if persons, for example, when I was at the Arima shelter, a lady was saying to me she would have lost her hearing aid. That is something the ministry will also consider replacing. So the government and the ministry is in fact doing all that it can, and we have several grants that can help bring persons back to a level of normalcy. And it is not just $10,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll ask Minister Rambarat now.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'll speak a little bit about Mayaro. This is since November 2014. This is the fourth time we've had this type of rain and flood in Mayaro. What normally happens is that as the rain comes down, the Pool River, which is the western boundary of the Mayaro constituency, the Pool River will get swollen, and that water will course through Rio Claro and all the communities heading east, and then eventually it's dumped in Mafikin, and Mafikin tends to take the brunt of the water that we have in southeast. And this year has been the same. So right away when we have high levels in Mafikin, we have the access being blocked in Aprima Mayaro Road leading into Mayaro. In and out is blocked. And this time around we had the additional issue of the Manzanilla Mayaro Road being blocked at a particular point. Once the water subsided late on Sunday, the Aprima Mayaro Road was passable. The road through from Mayaro to Manzan is still impassable for cars, but it's, higher vehicles could navigate. And so we have the access being restored. In the Mafikin area, of course, the many homes there, that is an area that is essentially lagoon, riverbank, dwelling, low-lying, and it's always been an issue in terms of the effect. So the key issue is having the water run off. It's very difficult. The Army, the Coast Guard, they've been there. It's always an issue accessing and being able to bring relief when we have that level of water in Mafikin and in the houses. The last area all the time to be dealt with is Cedar Grove. Cedar Grove is particularly difficult because the Ottawa River flows maybe about 8 feet from the roadway. And as you enter maybe 150 feet into the Cedar Grove Road, you have to deal with a dip where the height of the water is about 6 to 8 feet, very difficult to navigate. And once you get there and you go maybe another kilometer, you have to deal with a very treacherous corner that is both a dip and a curve along the Ottawa River. I have navigated it twice. On the second occasion, I decided that it is too much of a risk. And even the Coast Guard, as you know, in 2014, I was on the swollen Ottawa River with the Coast Guard. We went into Cedar Grove, and I told myself I'm not going to put people at risk like that again. It's just a swollen river. moving very quickly, a lot of debris. You go in there with a pirogue and you find that between vines and weed and pieces of branches and so on, you get into a lot of difficulties in getting there. But we do maintain contact with people who are in there. And the last place where the road becomes passable is Cedar Grove, and access has been made into Cedar Grove. We've had tremendous support. I saw Glenn Ram, the chairman of the Mayaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation, in the media talking about not seeing the army and not seeing the support. That is not true. I was there throughout. I mean, that is my home community. All the relief agencies, all the law enforcement will tell you, I know the terrain as good as anybody else in that community. I'm always very careful. There are dangers. There were injuries even in this. My own brother fractured his elbow on Saturday morning trying to navigate that area. But we were fully supported from all the law enforcement agencies, and I want to say that. And then, of course, Mayaro is always well supported by donors around the country. We've had a tremendous response. Sunday I was in there, Minister of National Security, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, Mr. Wint was there. And a lot of things that are delivered in Mayaro are delivered either by me personally or under my watch, and people know that they've been getting support. In terms of the ministry, I want to say that the good thing about the recent weather is that it's not affected south and southwest, so we've not had to respond to the north and to the south. What that would do is that the farmers in south and southwest would be able to continue to supply the market. But I can tell you that Orange Grove, up until yesterday, Orange Grove was still underwater. The roads, the farms were underwater. Once we get to that stage, those whatever was on the ground in Orange Grove has been lost, possibly with the exception of planting and things like that. But whatever was on the ground in terms of short crop has been lost. Maloney, another highly productive area, the water had run off eventually, but there will be some losses in Maloney again for things like pawpaw and other crops of that nature. We'll have to see the extent to which the integrity of the trees has been affected. But I expect significant losses through Orange Grove, Maloney, and of course Kelly Village, St. Helena, across central Trinidad. We expect that short crops going to be affected. One of the interesting things for us this time around, the ministry itself has suffered losses in some of the facilities. I just came from El Carmen and some of the other areas. The Pradial Lasni squad had to be rescued by National Security from their headquarters in El Carmen. So thankfully, I want to thank our ministry employees. I was with them this morning. They are leading the cleanup and the relief efforts. And you know, the ministry itself, as I seek donations for my community and for the rest of the country, I've also sought support, and we've gotten support across the country for the ministry employees who live in Las Lomas. Our engineering division, for example, there are 21 employees who are personally affected. Our research division, about 35 employees who are affected. These are people who live in Las Lomas, Kelly Village, St. Helena. Across the country, the farmers are not only dealing with farms, they're dealing with their families. You're talking about farmers in Las Lomas. Some of the Orange Grove farmers, not all, some live in Tunapuna. St. Helena, they're dealing with it on both sides, and I'll talk about St. Helena in a little while. Aranguez South, always, the problem with Aranguez South, thankfully we do have an issue in Tabaquite this time around. Aranguez South, farming so close to the riverbank, once the water comes up, you're affected by the overflow. I've been hearing talk about the pumps and so on. My colleague, Minister of Works, will talk about the pumps, but I could tell you, in fact, he called me last night and he asked me what are you doing down there with my pumps? So I was down there last night looking and making sure that the pumps are functional, and he would talk a little bit more about that. The one thing that I have not had to deal with, and the ministry has not had to deal with as far as I know, has been this issue of rescuing livestock and also dealing with dead animals. So as we came from Sunday into Monday, in fact there was a video posted on Facebook which you know, the location was not known. It was a video of cattle in pens and the water had gotten up almost up to the nostrils. And we went through a lot of pain Monday night to find that farmer and find that farm, and it was good that all the animals survived. The animals are safe. That is a very positive story. Part of the issue with livestock farms and the ministry, we've been taking notes, and we have to do some specific work with livestock farmers and in terms of disaster response to livestock farmers. But some of the issues relate to the drainage on the farms themselves. They need to clear the watercourses which are on the farms and close to the farms, and they need to really improve the data and also some of the other issues on the farms. Because when we have good data, we know what we're dealing with in terms of the numbers, in terms of rescue and recovery. So on the sad side, we know that there have been losses to farmers, and we had to put things in place yesterday to retrieve and rescue live animals, but also identify and remove dead animals. In fact, I just came from St. Helena, where we're doing some of that right now. It's difficult to say the extent of the loss, but you have small farmers who are hit significantly, and we're working with them, because disposing, finding dead livestock and disposing is a very important part of public health. If that gets out of control in St. Helena, for example, where the families are removing the water-affected stuff and putting it on the roadside and cleaning up their own homes, if you have to deal with stench and decay in animals and so on, it introduces another level of frustration for them. And I'm happy to say that we've made significant inroads in dealing with those that issue. And if anybody or any farmer who has not been contacted has an issue with livestock, even if it's one animal, they know how to contact me, they know how to contact the ministry. And it is a matter that I have taken personal responsibility for, because I want to make sure we just simply have not had to deal with it. And through the support from my colleague, Minister of Works, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, who was out with me yesterday, CPEP, URP, and I must say I'm working with 12 students from UTT and 3 professors from UTT. And the students they've been very courageous, and I think they've learned a side of livestock and farm management that they would not have gotten in UTT, and I'm very thankful for their support. Some of them have gone to Greenvale at this time to lend additional support. So thank you very much.
Thanks. And now the Minister of Works and Transport, Mr. Cinnamon.
Okay, good morning again, and welcome members of the media. Minister of National Security would have given an update as to the road network and in Trinidad and Tobago. Happy this morning that there are no areas that is totally cut off in Trinidad. The only area we do have a slight challenge is that Manzanilla to Mayaro area, where at some point we still have about 12 inches of water on the roadway. However, that doesn't stop the trucks and the SUV from passing. We still advise that cars try to desist from that area, but the water is receding. Unfortunately, that area, we have the Nariva swamp that pumps the water across the Manzanilla Road, and that normally takes just under a week to drain out properly. There's no way we could pump the Nariva swamp to take that water out. It just has to have a natural flow. Outside of that area, we do have some challenges in the very low-lying area, like the El Sicuro South area that we heard some talk about, and we do have, I think, is one more area in Bamboo. The challenge with these areas are naturally the lowest part of the corridor, and most of the water have to make your way down there. I've heard instances about pumps and so not working. I have a report here that I called for this morning, and I can assure you that in Sadu Trace we have 3 pumps working this morning. In William Street we have 2 pumps working. In Bamboo 1 we have 2 pumps working. One is under repairs, but we do have 2 pumps, which is adequate there. Bamboo 2 pumps working, bamboo 3 pumps working. The Sealots area where we have that pump house, pumps working. One of the challenges you have with pumps and gates is that you cannot pump if the rivers are high and you have breaches, because all you'll be doing is recycling the water. You have to wait for the rivers to drop, and then you pump from the land into the river. So I understand the plight of some of the residents who will probably see a pump off, but it makes no sense you running a pump if the river water is higher than the land, because all you'll be doing is pumping the water into the river to come back onto the land. You have to wait for the water to levels in the river to drop. Once that drop, all the pumps will normally kick in. And as we speak, we have pumps working throughout the areas that is underwater. As a matter of fact, Minister of Agriculture would tell you that up to last night, 10 o'clock, we had people out there ensuring that the pumps were filled with diesel, and we brought in extra pumps to try to take the water out as quickly as possible. So we are monitoring that. During the flood, we did get some shifting of some of the pumps. Some of the pumps were actually underwater because of the level of the water. But all that have been sorted out, and now that the rivers have dropped their levels, the water is being pumped out. The last report I have from the El Socorro area is that the water have dropped significantly from last night to this morning, and we expect by this evening to have that water at a controllable level in there. So in terms of the flood waters, I think we have gone past the flood waters now. What we're in the process of at the ministry is what we're doing is inspecting all the infrastructure, because we did take a pounding on some of the bridges and the roadways. We have not found any area that is critical. There are minor challenges in some of the areas on the North Coast and certain areas on the highway which have been temporarily restored. What we're anticipating is a lot of landslips, because we are aware that the soil is saturated. We did have a problem over the last couple of years, and coming down to the end of the rainy season now is when you actually find a lot more landslips. Yesterday we had some challenges on the Lady Young Road, which we addressed, and with the assistance from the Ministry of Agriculture, what we are doing is that we have a continuous program for the next week to identify all the trees on the Lady Young Road that might pose a potential threat going forward, and we're actually taking them down before they come down. Once we take down the trees, then the engineers will go in. We are working with the University of the West Indies and some other engineers to actually look at the areas so we can do some benching on the areas before we have a disaster on the Lady Young Road. So we're being a little proactive there. We're also using that same technique on the Paria Main Road and the Maracas Road. So what we'll be doing over the next couple of days is identifying potential areas, re-inspecting some of the Bailey bridges that we have up, and a continuous inspection of the infrastructure. We have a program of resheeting some of the roads that would have been damaged now that the water would have receded. So we at the ministry will be out there continuously ensuring that the infrastructure remain intact, and anywhere that is identified under the emergency relief funding, we are going to address it immediately. Where we are now in Trinidad and Tobago is at the stage of the cleanup. And again, I want to reiterate that Trinidad and Tobago came together under this disaster. Relief continued to pour in. What I want to urge us as citizens, let us make sure that it reaches to the right people in the right places. Because what we find happening is that there are some people who are going at the same place all the time, and there are still some people who do need relief. At the Ministry of Works, we are going into some of these areas because most of our infrastructure are in areas that only our vehicles can access, and we are actually assisting by taking in things to these people. Most of our pump houses and so are in areas that you really couldn't access before, or the average citizens cannot access. We are going in there and we are taking in relief to these people. Trinidad and Tobago is at the cleanup stage now, and if we could continue this drive and this national patriotism, I am sure within the next couple of days we will be back to normal, and we will continue to assist the citizens who have been seriously affected. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ministers. There's just two items I'd just like to utilize the opportunity to address: the diaspora issue. We have been having a lot of contact, not only from some of our embassies away, but also by the diaspora away, volunteering or offering to volunteer to ship goods and items to Trinidad and Tobago. We acknowledge and recognize that these continue to be acts of kindness and a desire to help and assist those in need. But at this stage, it is very difficult for the government to take on the logistics of it, because then people are asking about clearing it from customs, etc. We do not, at this stage, the government is not in a, we're not taking that on, we're not taking that task on. And one of the things that was suggested this morning, all of the various commercial banks have opened accounts. They have actually gotten into arrangements, for example, with United Way and other NGOs, where the money that is raised in those accounts would then be used by the NGOs to get supplies to those who are in need. We ask that persons who want to donate, persons in our diaspora, to please get hold of these accounts. That is one way that you could donate and send money, and it just avoids all of the logistical nightmares of trying to clear a number of goods. Also, we're very conscious that persons may utilize those, see those as opportunities to bring in all sorts of different items that we may not want on our shores. So at this stage, whilst our efforts are focused on the day-to-day duties that exist, as well as providing relief, and as Minister Sinanan has said, the cleanup exercise, we are not in a position to accept that type of help and relief at this stage. I thank you all very much. In ending this part of the press conference, and before we take questions, once again, we thank and commend all of those who have been assisting, who have been helping, all of the public servants in the various ministries, all of our citizens, our Defense Force, our Police Service, Fire, Coast Guard, even the prisons, our lifeguards, Ministry of Works and Transport, Rural Development, Agriculture, Social Development, Education, Health, all of the various ministries and all of the public servants and the volunteers and our citizens. Thank you all very much. And as Minister Sinanan says, if we continue this community effort and coming together, we will get through this and we will be better off for it at the end of the day. Take some questions at this stage. All right, thank you. Morning, Derek.
Good morning, Mr. Young. You mentioned that an incident in the St. Helena area where some citizens, as you put it, were behaving less than law-abiding. Do you care to expatiate on that?
What I can tell you is late last night, citizen reached out to me personally and said that there had been some incidents of, whilst they were taking relief items through the St. Helena area to the relief shelters, they met with some obstruction and persons wanting to take the items. We immediately got the police involved, and I know later on the Defense Force were doing patrols and to secure the relief shelters, etc. I can understand that there's a lot of frustration because, as Minister Sinanan has alluded to, in some of these areas it's very spread out, and there's some persons who are not on the main roads and this type of thing. So it is quite an exercise. You had to wait for the waters to recede, etc., and then to get the items to them. And I'd like to reiterate, and I concur with him, that persons, please don't take advantage of the situation. We are getting reports of persons, it's gone beyond double dipping in relief supplies. There are still persons who have not yet gotten what they need, and we're trying to get those resources and that relief to them. Let that happen. So that's what the incident was. But the police were very quick in dealing with it. There was no untoward incident, no violence, etc. And we quickly put things in place to deal with it.
Minister, you spoke earlier on about the diaspora wanting to assist. Of course, I believe the Caribbean Airlines sent out a release recently where people were trying to post saying that they were collecting on behalf of Caribbean Airlines. And of course, they denied that by sending out a release of some sort. What advice you have for people who want to donate, but there are other people trying to pose and capitalize on people's grief? Is this something that you all are looking at? And by extension, of course, the authorities, the law enforcement authorities, monitoring this as well very closely.
That is one particular incident. My understanding of that incident is it was not an untoward one. You really had legitimate persons in the diaspora trying to collect. They did not say that Caribbean Airlines was going to deliver it free of charge, etc. But I don't have all of the specifics. What you've identified, Mr. Bassan, is one of the reasons we don't want to encourage it at this stage. Unfortunately, and this is not only in Trinidad, this is a worldwide phenomenon, that when persons are in disasters and coming out of it, fraudsters and shysters always seem to rise and try to find the opportunities to rip law-abiding and citizens and persons who want to genuinely help off. If we have any instances of that and the law enforcement authorities have the evidence for it, I am certain they will prosecute it, and I would certainly be behind them and asking them to prosecute if there's anyone taking advantage of persons at this time.
I know you asked this question yesterday, but 24 hours later, have you all been able to do a proper damage assessment and give us a dollar value to date as to what we're looking at?
Again, is a prioritization of resources. The damage assessment, of you've heard from an infrastructural point of view, is taking place. HDC, Social Development, Ministry of Work, some of the other ministries whose responsibility it is, have been looking at damaged infrastructure, etc. We still don't have a price. The truth is a tally. It's a running tally that's going to be taking place, and we will be able to provide that, I think, sometime after the incident has been closed off. But really at this stage, I will give you a figure this morning, and then by this afternoon it'll change, and then the media will be saying I gave an incorrect figure because they're not plugging it at the point in time. So at the end, we will do our best to provide that type of information. But at this stage, I don't want to jump into that realm.
We've also seen, unprecedented flooding along the highways. And would you say, can the state be also held liable in this respect, based on highway extensions and so on that have been going on over the last 2 years or so?
Absolutely not from a liability point of view. I mean, the highway that was affected is the Uriah Butler Highway. What we're seeing, and it's happening all over the world, as I pointed out yesterday, you had flooding incidents in Qatar where in one day, a whole year's, an annual rainfall of a year dropped in Qatar. It is a phenomenon that's taking place all over the world. In the United States, we've had flooding incidents recently, South America, etc. What we need to look at, and I'm sure the Ministry of Works is looking at how best they may be able to assist in an instance like this. But from what I saw, and it was really the unprecedented dumping of serious millimeters of rain, inches of rain over a short period of time, and for continuous over a continuous period of time, over 24 to 48 hours. Nothing could have been done about that.
If I could just add to what the minister said. If you look at where the highway breached, it was at the Caroni Bird Sanctuary, at where the Caroni River actually crosses the highway. So the volume of water that was coming down on the Caroni River, obviously when it reached that bridge there, it had to topple. And then you have the water coming off the rice lands that had to get to the ocean, and that's why the highway breached at certain points. The lowest point of the highway, where the Guayma and the Caroni rivers were trying to get to the ocean. So it has nothing to do with the extension. As a matter of fact, the new extensions are built at a height. The areas that flood, the Southern Main Road, the Madras Road, these are roads that were built years ago, and most of them are actually below the land level now. So the expansion of highways will technically assist us in times like these.
Lastly, my last question. Going forward, is a proper assessment or engineering assessments being done in where you position housing developments, seeing that Greenville has been in an area where I understand that the river was diverted, the river courses were diverted when that development was built. And I know it goes back from the former PNM administration, and I know it was opened under the UNC.
As I said yesterday and at yesterday's press conference, we expect, and I expect the relevant authorities and ministries, and I'm sure they're going to do it, to do a proper assessment, have the experts look at it. I made the point yesterday with Greenvale, you raised Greenvale, that you can see the meandering rivers, you can see that there has been some diversion of the normal water course. And when you have that amount of water coming down, a retention pond, quite frankly, is not going to be sufficient. So the answer is yes, the experts are going to look at that particular area and instance. And I would hope that going forward, we learn from this. I will tell you that I saw in a lot of low-lying areas, private projects being built as we currently speak, very, very close and in floodplains throughout the whole of central Trinidad, even coming out of the Mayaro area and across Trinidad. And I wondered, well, you know, what is going on there from a planning point of view? So yes, this is something that has to be looked at going forward.
Minister, morning.
Morning.
Minister Colbert, first off, you said that 194 grants, checks ought to be distributed sometime today. Do you have a dollar value to that?
Most of them would be at the maximum because most of these are for the replacement of household items and furniture, so it's 10,000.
So this would have been, so when we talk about the 1,502 assessments, these would have been household assessments generally?
The 15,000 in terms of structural damage?
15, you mentioned?
Figure that you gave.
Oh, okay. What happened when we went into the areas, we would have done a complete assessment. So we would have identified those that require household replacement, structural, and otherwise. In terms of the furniture, those are the ones that we have done firstly. Remember, as I would have indicated at the last media briefing, we are also working very closely with the Ministry of Housing and Self-Help, and they are dealing with the structural. They would then refer to us if there is need for the electrical and the sanitary plumbing.
Okay, Minister Young, we're still working with the 3,500 homes and 120,000 persons. That figure
With
stands?
those estimates, yes.
Okay. In terms of the fatalities from flooding, how exactly is that classified? Like, is it just drowning? And I mean, the Ministry of Health, you did say issue this.
As far as I'm aware, there can only be one type of fatality, death. So if there are no fatalities and there are no deaths recorded coming out of the flooding incident, then there's nothing to record, there's no categorization. If it were different, I guess it could have been death by drowning, it could have been death by electrocution and many other areas. Fortunately, at this time, and we're quite a few days into it now, there are no recorded fatalities as a result of the flooding.
Minister of Works, Mr. Sinanan, you know, interestingly, your colleague there to your right, he did speak about the need to clear water courses. From your being on the ground, what did you see? Could measures have been taken before the floods, desilting, the clearing of water courses? Could they have been taken to mitigate some of the flooding that we experienced?
I think what my colleague, Ms. Harker, was referring to is water courses on the farms. Now, I think what he's referring to is that even on farms, you create artificial water courses to trap water and things like that. That is what he was referring to. Again, throughout 2018, the ministry would have undergone a significant program of clearing water courses. We took the ambitious task of going after 298 projects, which was approved by Cabinet. That was supposed to be for the calendar year. At the financial year, we had already accomplished over 230, with the rest to be completed. And because of the change in the budget, we should be able to do a lot more. So we would have cleaned a significant amount of water courses. However, flooding is not, we always tie flooding to water courses cleaning. Flooding has to do with capacity of water and the volume of rainfall. Based on the volume of rainfall, and I want to remind the population, we got almost 30% more of the monthly average in just 2.5 days. There is no way you can build enough infrastructure to cater for that. Your infrastructure caters for a certain amount of rainfall, certain volume. into your channels. And that is why even in the most developed countries in North America, in Europe, you have flooding. What was significant with that volume of rain and that disaster, within 2 days, the water have receded. What that says is that our water courses were cleared, and once the tide went down, because you have a six-hour cycle, the water was able to drain out. You'd recognize that, I think it was on Monday, we had a significant downpour in the Barataria area. The Barataria was flooded, the bus route was flooded, and within 10 minutes, the water ran off. What that means is that your water courses are cleared, but the volume of water for the channels, you can't handle it, but the water is running off fast. If the water courses were blocked, that would not have happened.
But in terms of the country's drainage system, should it be relooked? I mean,
it has to be, because most of our infrastructure would have been built 30, 40 years ago. We have not built any channels in Trinidad. I think the last channel that I'm hearing about in the ministry is the Nuka channel down in the deep south. That was about 50 years ago. And the Nuka channel now is overflowing. What does that mean? That the Newcut channel, and when I heard about Newcut, I thought it was recent until I visited, and then they said, no, it's named Newcut because it was 50 years ago. That have outlived its usefulness now. So yes, we do have a problem with our water courses and our channels. Unfortunately, we had a culture where we built villages next to the rivers. How are we going to relocate these villages now? One of I think it's Royal Haskell study for the Mayaro area was that we should remove the whole of Mafikin, the entire village, and move it out. That seems to be impossible at this time. And if you look at the east-west corridor, if you have to widen the water courses and so, you will have to remove entire communities. So we do have a challenge there. What we're looking at, we got approval this year is for the Caroni River, for the rebuilding of the banks on the Caroni River, and system of putting additional pumps and so. That program is ongoing. There's a tender out for that, and we're hoping that we would try to make the best out of the Caroni by doing some dredging in the Caroni and rebuilding the banks. That is basically what we're doing. In the Maraval area, we're now going to actually do a survey on the river to see where we can get additional space, and that is something we will do on most of the water courses, wherever there's available space, to try to widen in those areas and try to deepen some of the water courses.
You did speak about the Caroni project, but when the cleanup is over, what is your first goal or initiative? What's the first thing you're going to do to prevent as much as you can? We
do have a program already for the Caroni River, which is the rebuilding of the banks and the pumps. So that is a program that is ongoing. The tender is out, and I'm happy that we are at that stage with it, so that in this financial year we will see a lot of work happening in the Caroni River. We do have another program with the other water courses and so. But as I said before, the weather pattern has changed so much that we have to put a lot more emphasis on our water courses and our drainage system. There is a challenge, because how do you go and re-engineer the existing ones? There's no space to cut new ones. So we just have to ensure that we maximize what we have. But again, it has to do with capacity and volume.
Minister Young, is the government now looking at a policy, just piggybacking on Mark's question there, at your policy with regards to housing developments near water courses? Because, I mean, Greenvale isn't the only one. There's also Orapun and Ibis Gardens, which also floods frequently.
I think, as we've said repeatedly over the last few days, it is something that we need to be aware of. I'm sure that the planners, the Ministry of Housing, HDC, are going to give active consideration to future housing developments and where they're located, and in particular take on board one of the issues being flooding, potential for flooding.
As far as Greenvale is concerned, is there anything that you all do intend to do, Minister of Works, you as well, there to prevent this from happening again? You did describe it as a basin.
Yeah, but we just answered that exact question. We said that the experts are going to look at it. We're going to wait on what the expert report suggests as to how we should deal with it.
How long will that take?
I have no idea. As soon as possible.
Suppose there's another bout of rains before then.
There's no short-term solution to flooding. I was in Greenville yesterday and with the team from the ministry. We are working with the HDC. The HDC, there are 2 retention ponds in Greenville. Those ponds are for normal rainfall. They cannot handle the volume that we have. What has to happen there is the river. We have to look at the river and see if we can rebuild some embankment on the river. But again, nothing that you do will prevent flooding in low-lying areas. Excessive rainfall, you can't help with that. The water has to run somewhere, and the water will go to the lowest point in the island and settle there, and it will breach once you have a high tide, and the water can't flow into the sea. So we are working with the HCC. We met yesterday with them, and we are going to revisit that whole river, the back of the development, to see if we can do some more raising the embankment on the river. But again, it is a low-lying area.
Can we get
I'd
your
just like to
commitment?
re-emphasize a point that seems to be lost here. Exactly what Minister Sinanan has said, and I don't know if is sinking in. When you look at what has been happening globally, you've seen unprecedented flooding taking place in Europe for the whole time, in England as well, and these places, and the type of flooding that we're seeing taking place in these areas, there's no infrastructure that you can build sometimes to deal with Mother Nature. So the amount of rainfall that fell, I don't know if it's being understood, as Minister Sinanan just said, 30% in excess of a monthly rainfall falling in the space of 2 days. There is no infrastructure that is going to prevent in floodplains flooding from taking place. And that is just a fact that we have to accept now. We're going to look at how to alleviate it as best as is possible. For those who have been on the ground there and seen what it is, they're massive retention ponds, but those retention ponds can in no way whatsoever, you can't build a retention pond to handle the type of rainfall that they experienced during the recent times.
I guess that's why the perception came that Greenville should have been condemned. And I guess my question to you now is, do we have your commitment that if Greenville is not safe, it's not structurally sound, that government will close it and relocate persons?
As I said, and I've said many times before, I'm not into speculation. I'm going to wait for the experts to do their analysis and come back to us. The Minister of Housing, I'm sure, will come to Cabinet with the outcome of those expert reports.
I just have one question on a point of clarity, because I don't want to say. Minister Corporal, you said you gave a breakdown, and I was just doing a little bit of math here, and it's roughly about $70,000 at least somebody can access. I just want to be clear, based on the math I did, it's roughly $70,000, yes, that a particular family or persons can access?
Yes, and house. Once they would have had damages in all those 4 areas, yes, they can. And it could go even higher because they also have the $1,000 per individual for clothing and then school supplies. So yes, you are correct.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay.
The meetings between PM and the microphone recently on Tuesday. Any further discussions on TNT's floods?
The meetings between the Prime Minister and the other Caribbean leaders. Yeah. I think we've made that point clear as well. The Prime Minister has thanked all of the various leaders who have reached out to him for the offers of help. At this stage, we are coping with it, and we believe we have the capacity to cope and deal with it. So at this stage, we're not accessing any assistance.
Further development in terms of perhaps offers to help with agricultural supplies?
I am sure that the Minister of Agriculture, if he needs, he will be in contact with his counterpart in the ministry in Guyana.
Minister Rambarat, Leo Soares from the Express. You would have mentioned various farming areas which were affected, and you said a number of short crops were damaged. Can you outline some of these for us?
Well, the usual short crops that would be damaged. In Orange Grove, you would have cabbage, you'll have tomatoes. The wide range of things that you normally find in the market, sweet pepper, those are the short crops. The normal things you'd find in the supermarket or the farmer's market.
And consumers expect increases in the prices of...
It's difficult to say. What I said is that without the damage in south and southwest, where we have significant amount of farming, we expect that we'd have supplies coming on the market. By the weekend, we would be in a better position to know. Farmers normally start harvesting from Wednesday, Thursday for the weekend sales. So we'd get a better idea at the farmers market on the weekend.
Okay, and can you give an estimate as to the number of cattle that was lost?
Well, in terms of cattle, I haven't seen any yet. In terms of small ruminants, sheep and goat, we're looking at 150 to 200. Pigs in the range of 100 so far.
All right, thank you very much, members of the media. As usual, we appreciate you all coming and covering this, and we use the opportunity to thank everyone and ask everyone to remain responsible and don't take any unnecessary risks. Thank you all very much.